This is the fifth in a series of videos about criticisms of benefit cost analysis. And this time I'm going to talk about the complaint that I've heard occasionally that benefit cost analysis is too focused on money and therefore neglects some important non-financial benefits that could arise from the projects that are being evaluated. This is a complaint that I think is true of some specific benefit cost analyses that have been done, but not of benefit cost analysis in general or benefit cost analysis as a technique, as you'll see. First thing to stress is that economics is not just about money. Despite the fact that money seems to figure so prominently in economics, actually it's about values and preferences of all types, including relatively intangible benefits. Sometimes you see intangible benefits referred to in economics as unpriced benefits or non-market benefits, but and I'll tend to sort of move around between those three options, but I mean the same thing in each case. And these types of benefits are obviously very important if we're looking at projects related to the environment, or maybe to recreation, or to human health. And if we didn't account for these intangible or unpriced benefits that come from these types of projects, we clearly wouldn't be able to say very much sensible about whether or not they were good projects. And yet benefit cost analysis is used quite extensively to evaluate these types of projects. And it does do a pretty good job of capturing the intangible benefits that arise. One of the things that we do as economists that sets off alarm bells in some people is that we like to monetize the benefits that arise from these intangible types of benefits. Even if they're not monetary in nature, we'd like to, if possible, to convert them to monetary equivalent values. And the way that we do that is to express them as a willingness to pay. We're interested in how much would people be willing to pay to get this particular benefit if they had to purchase it. And a strength of this approach is that it is exactly equivalent to how we value market goods. And so it means that we can easily compare between market goods and non-market goods. And that's part of the answer to this question, why monetize? Why would we go to the trouble of trying to express these relatively intangible benefits in monetary equivalent terms? Well, one reason is that it allows us to express benefits using a common currency. Of course, it's a common currency, it's currency, so that we can compare them. It allows us to include all relevant benefits in a benefit cost analysis in a quantitative way. And it allows us to compare benefits of radically different types. Most of the approaches used to evaluate different types of projects really struggle with this issue of comparing benefits of different types. Either they don't do it at all, or they do a fairly ad hoc and not very theoretically justified approach to try to compare those benefits. But using a monetization approach, we can get a more rigorous and more theoretically defensible comparison between the different benefits. It's important to stress, though, that even though we are monetizing them, they are still intangible benefits. They're still non-market or unpriced benefits. And the fact that we're expressing them in monetary equivalent terms doesn't mean that we only care about money, and it doesn't mean that we're trying to commodify these benefits. All we're doing is we're using money as a measuring device. Or in other words, we're tapping into one of the three main uses of money. Those three uses being that money can be a store of value, it can be a medium of exchange, or it can be a way of measuring value. And we're only doing the last of those three things when we're monetizing these intangible benefits. So you can see why I say that we're not trying to convert them into commodities. That would be the case if we were trying to use money as a medium of exchange, but we're not. We're just using it to measure value. How do we monetize them? Well, that's a very big question. There's an enormous literature on the different methods that economists use. So I'll just give you a very, very brief surface understanding of how we do it. We've got several different techniques. Some rely on doing interviews, and they're called stated preference approaches because we get people to state their preferences. The two main methods there are contingent valuation, where people tell us their willingness to pay directly, and the other one's called choice experiments, where we get people to tell us about their willingness to trade off between various benefits and the costs of delivering them. A second group of approaches relies on observing decisions that people make, which is called a revealed preference approach, because through those decisions people reveal what their preferences are. The two main approaches there are hedonic pricing, which relies on observing usually house prices and seeing how much they're affected by intangible issues such as the house's proximity to an environmental asset. Or the travel cost method, which looks at the trade-offs that people are willing to make between the cost of getting to a particular recreational asset and their demand for that asset. Then the third approach I've listed there is the value of a statistical life, which is a way of getting a handle on the benefits in monetary equivalent terms from preventing someone from dying. And then within the medical area, there are a number of specialised medical approaches, some of which do rely on monetisation and others of which don't. So that's an incomplete list of the approaches. There are some others that I haven't even listed on there. So there's a lot of different ways that we can go about trying to monetise what starts out feeling like a relatively intangible benefit. And amongst all of these different techniques, we've managed to accumulate quite a wealth of evidence about the magnitudes of these intangible benefits. There are literally thousands of studies available from many different contexts, looking at many different types of benefits. And so accessing these existing studies becomes a realistic alternative to doing an original study in many cases. So, of course, the ideal would be to do a new study using one of those techniques and using that to do a benefit cost analysis. But if that's not feasible or it looks too expensive, a second best approach is to use what's called benefit transfer, which means we extrapolate from a suitable existing study, if such a study is available. There are actually a number of databases available which pull together the existing studies that we could draw on. One of them is called the Environmental Valuation Reference Inventory, or the EVRI, EVRI. But there are also some more specialised databases for particular areas. Within my team, we've worked on pulling together specialised databases related to water or urban water, threatened species, and natural hazards. I'll finish by making some comments about the way this issue is dealt with in government guidelines. I've observed that in some government guidelines, they give benefit cost analysts a relatively easy way out. They don't really sort of strongly encourage people to use information about the monetary equivalent values of these intangible benefits. They sometimes offer a couple of alternatives which in my view are inferior. One alternative that you might be offered in these guidelines is to calculate a break-even value. And that means you ask, how valuable would this intangible benefit need to be to make a difference for this benefit cost analysis, to flip it between being an unfavourable result to a favourable result. And then we leave it to the decision makers to judge whether this particular benefit is large or small relative to that break-even value. And then that can influence their decision making. Another approach that is sometimes suggested is to be just qualitative rather than quantitative. So rather than trying to say a monetary equivalent value, you just describe the intangible benefit in words in as much detail as you can, and maybe you include some numbers about the magnitude in a non-monetary sense, but you don't go to the step of actually quantifying it in monetary equivalent terms. My view is that those two approaches are both better than nothing, but neither of them is good as using a benefit transfer approach, and clearly not as good as doing an original study. So my preference would be for these government guidelines to give a bit more weight to the benefits of doing a non-market valuation study or drawing on existing studies and including that information in benefit cost analyses. In conclusion then, let me emphasise that benefit cost analysis is not just about money. It's possible to express non-financial benefits in monetary equivalent terms, and if non-financial benefits are important to a project, then we should be doing that. The way we do that is by estimating people's willingness to pay for this non-financial benefit. This approach is routine in environmental economics, and it's used in various other areas of economics as well. And there's lots of evidence available that we could draw on. And the use of this evidence or the use of original studies should be more encouraged in government guidelines. To finish then, if you're interested in benefit cost analysis, could I encourage you to look at enrolling in my micro-credential course called Applied Benefit Cost Analysis. This course is online and it's a mixture of pre-recorded and live sessions. It runs over 12 weeks and can be done either as a standalone professional development unit or as part of a master's degree. You don't need any existing economic background to do the course, and it's been running for a while now, and I've had fantastic feedback from people who've done it already. If you think you might be interested, check out further details at appliedbca.org.